All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Crunchy Take. This will be Crunchy Take episode 22. As you can see, this is the second time I've had a woman on the podcast, and every time this happens, I'm always giddy because it's a chance for me to talk about something other than sports, other than movies and nerdgastic topics. And today I have a very special guest, one I've been looking forward to for a while now, Laura Mumme. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, when I initially broached the topic or sent an invitation, I'm always curious to see how people react. And when the reaction that you had was like, "Oh, I love sharing my story," to me, that's like I find that real encouraging.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a introduction, Laura. What exactly is it you do? I know you are a nurse at Community East, right?
Community East.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you briefly
I
describe?
work on the ICU PCU, which when I explain that to people, so let's say in the hospital there are 3 levels of care as according to an intensity of care. So
Sure.
There's the critical care unit, that's the most intense. There's a progressive care unit or PCU. That's a little bit less intense, but people can still be unstable. And then there's med surge. These people tend to be the most stable patients. So I work like ICU, PCU level, so we don't have people who are intubated, but they can have very unstable blood pressures, heart rates. They can be withdrawing from alcohol, in renal failure, getting dialysis, all sorts of acute things. And instead of having 2 patients or 1 patient like you would in the critical care unit, I would have 3 patients. So it's a little bit, it's busy. I do.
So this maybe before we get into like some minor details, first describe what the process is. Your average work day. So like when you show up, when these patients arrive, what's like the protocol that you usually do to or go through to accept these patients? Like, is it the doctor assigns you, or do you have a team that you normally go with, and then just like you kind of are assigned for people for the day, or what does that process look like for you?
Every day, so a hospital is constantly in flux because people don't plan their hospitalization. So
Right.
they come into the emergency room, and from there, the emergency room docs will decide whether they get admitted to the hospital or not. Like, for instance, if somebody comes in with a cold, they might need Tamiflu, and then you send them back home. But let's say somebody comes in, they are confused, and their heart rate's jumped up to like 180 beats per minute. That's an unstable person. They're going to get admitted to the hospital. They need to be stabilized before sending them back home. So the doctor will admit the patient to the hospital, and then the administration, like the chart, each floor has a nurse in charge. And so every day, these nurses in charge have multiple meetings a day, and they talk about how many beds are open in the hospital, how many can we admit, how much staff do we have? Because what if we have open beds, but we don't have any staff? So every day, that's a constant conversation. And so if that patient gets admitted, then the administrative nurses will assign them to the unit, and the nurse in charge on my unit will let me know, hey, you're getting another patient. And the nurse in charge every day assigns each nurse for 3 patients.
Wow. That's crucial information for us to know, is the average public, because that's our public perception of hospitals. It's and rightfully so, right? It's this place of sanctuary, people, and people are there for, but what we don't think about are all the intangibles that go into helping just even one patient. So when I guess when COVID started happening, all the talk about numbers and just the amount of beds that hospitals have, that blew my mind. That kind of really struck a chord with me, just because I never took that into account. And that's something that you guys that's always been a part of your practice, right? Even before COVID, it's
Yes.
Like this is something that's almost like a constant source of stress to you, would you say?
No, I wouldn't say it's a constant source of stress. I also think community does a good job of keeping of being reasonable with staffing assignments. If, let's say, if there was a heavy influx of patients and we didn't have the staff to take care of all of them, we would go on what's called diversion, which means we still take patients who walk into the ER, but we don't take patients from ambulances. So all the ambulances know which hospitals on diversions, and they will not go to those hospitals.
Man, I have so many technical questions there, but before that, let's hold off on procedure, whatnot. So this is your day off, and again, thank you so much for wanting to do this. What does your typical day off look like? Do you have any hobbies that you know?
There's no typical.
No typical, huh?
Yeah, I always exercise. I love exercise is how I process stress. So I usually swim or ride my bike. Today I made some split pea soup with like bacon in it, and it's going to be really good. It's actually simmering on my stove as we talk.
Sounds amazing. You're going to have to tell me all these different recipes that you do. It's just like nutrition wise, I'm looking for ways to lose weight. I'm looking for ways to get down to a certain weight level, monitor my nutrition better each week as each week goes on, It's
important. Exercises too. And I feel like a lot of people, this is just my 2 cents, so you're going to hear it. When it comes to exercise, I feel like a lot of Americans feel like they have to go run a marathon, or they have to like sweat and be uncomfortable and be tense and like really, and you really don't. Like going on a walk after dinner is really good for you.
Right.
But I think whatever you enjoy is what you'll keep doing. And I wish I could just tell people, like, enjoy your life, like find an activity that you enjoy and just do that. Don't feel like you have to lift weights, or you have to, mile every morning at 5:30 a.m. You don't have to do that.
Yeah. So. No, that's a great outset to have, because it seems you touched on it a little earlier. You said that exercise is how you process stress. Would you say it does more? I honestly think for adults, it does so much more for you mentally than probably physical. The mental aspect of just, even if you're under, say you've had a bad day at work or whatnot, and you don't even, it's like you said, you don't have to get yourself in the gym, you don't have to get yourself pumping weights or anything like that, but something as simple and as like kind of visceral as going outside and taking a walk. How much can you say from a mental and kind of mental well-being standpoint? How crucial is it just to get like tiny little bursts of exercise a day, or every week?
I need it. Like for me, or for those people?
For you and for people. I guess for you it's even more important, right? But yeah.
I mean, for people, I feel there are so many different body types and so many different people. Like my sister, she's not into heavy exercise. But for her, stretching every day, that helps her. I don't know, just kind of opens her up. She has the energy to do the things she needs to do well. For me, I need endurance. I need to go some distance and like think. Like when I was in college, I would go in the mountain trails, and I would end up being out there for like 2 hours. And I wasn't pushing myself hard, but I was thinking about stuff, and I would forget that I was running.
Right.
And like swim, I don't think about my workday when I leave, but when I exercise, I start thinking about, this patient was going through this, and that. And sometimes when I'm swimming, I'll like actually be underwater, like either laughing or crying, or like maybe it looks a little weird to someone, but it's how it's when I start feeling things. I don't feel a lot when I'm at work. So which some people think is bad, but for me, if I felt everything, I would crash.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, it sounds horrible, but you're there. It's like we have a job to do. For me, I work in customer service. I work as I currently work as a retail associate for a grocery store. Hey, like, if customers are being hard with you, you can't have like this. You've got to be mentally tough, which I think you're getting at. You have this mental toughness, but at a certain point, also, what is a part of that process? You kind of push the emotion back, and you get the job done. You execute. You're like a Navy SEAL. You see the objective and you go for it. But when you're downtime, if you're not giving yourself the time to process these different emotions or whatnot, you will break, you know.
Yes.
So wait, it sounds okay.
Well, and just to give kind of an example, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Give me
Just to give like an example, like before, so during COVID, they shut down the gym, so I couldn't go to the Y. I go to the Y and swim.
Right.
And so I never really cried at work when all of that was happening, just a few times, and those were really extreme situations. But then in probably June, I would just be at the grocery store and all of a sudden I would start crying, or I'd be in my car and I would just I was like, this is weird. This is not me. And I would just be in random places and feel like I don't know what to do with all these emotions that I didn't even know I had, because it takes me like 2 months to process my emotions.
Yeah.
And I would just multiple times just like be somewhere and just start sobbing. And I felt like almost a Vietnam vet, like, you know, like,
yeah,
I couldn't handle, I didn't have the resources to handle it internally.
Yeah.
So when back the Y up, I was there on day one.
Oh. So, you know, you mentioned the Y shut down for you. What were, so, you know, in as an adult and in our lifetimes, we have to adjust to certain things. So what were things you had to do to kind of replace the Y? What were things you did outside of the Y and like exercise wise? Because, you know, there are some people, there might be some people listening, or, you know, there are people that can't even afford the Y, or can't even go to the Y, you know? So what were things that you did as an alternative to that, would you say?
I tried doing a few like video cast Pilates classes. I really like Pilates.
Pilates, okay.
They had a cost, and I don't have internet, so it's kind of like this is hard to maintain. So then I did try to run a few times, but I'm on my feet for 12 hours at work, so running actually doesn't feel as good as it used to when I wasn't working 12-hour shifts. And so then I would like go to my parents' house sometimes and lift weights there. But I think honestly for the whole 2 months, I did not get into a good rhythm until the Y opened back up. I didn't finish adapting. I didn't have enough time.
But you know, thankfully I can totally relate to that. You know, when COVID started, the best I could do was maybe jog around the neighborhood, which to me, I have shoddy ankles. I'm paranoid as all heck when I go outside, you know, tape up my ankles and running outside. I do love it, but to me, running isn't, I guess for you, it's like completely your thing. You love to run. It sounds like you do. You do triathlons, right? As far as, did you say?
I do sprint triathlons.
What is that?
Sprint triathlons. So a sprint triathlon is basically anything less than an Olympic distance triathlon. So a sprint triathlon is not a defined distance. But the ones I do tend to be about 500-meter swim, 10-mile bike, 3-mile run. So you can do it in like an hour and 15 minutes. I've done an Olympic once before, and I'd like to do another one. But this summer, I was so tired that physically I just could not. They're going to do an Olympic this summer.
Yeah, well, this year, you clearly aren't alone. This year's been a funk for so many different people. Like just the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows. But I think it's even more important, you know, just from a distance, like, to go when you don't feel like it. That's honestly might be the most important thing, especially with workouts, you know, especially on days that you don't feel like it. Now, obviously for you, it's a little different because, like you said, you're on your feet 12 hours a day. You know, people like you and me who do basically physical labor jobs, you know, we're just on our feet. And the last thing you want to do at the end of the day is I'll be on your feet for another intensive cardio, you know,
right?
In another dehydrated
Some
state.
people can do it. I just did. I'm not one of them.
But for me, like, I do biking. For me, my form of exercise that really is that stress reliever for me would be basketball. It's jiu-jitsu, and at this point, it's jiu-jitsu and martial arts. And then just getting in the gym. But do you have any? And for you, it seems to be, you know, sprint triathlons or running. But do you have any advice for people that just don't have that love or that like drive to want to work out? Like, what are some key things that people should and have to do, or people should be doing to kind of get themselves in that position? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes from your thinking. I
Mhm.
feel like a lot of people in their thinking view exercise as a burden. Oh, like
Yeah.
I just can't enjoy this. And I think humans are amazing, dynamic beings,
Mhm.
and we are learning beings. If something's enjoyable and you don't enjoy it at first, it can be learned. And so I don't come from like a place of judgment, like all you bums out there need to get up. But like I come from a like expand your thinking, and
Mhm.
that can shape your actions. Like I said, people, you don't have to go run a marathon, but a walk on a fall day, like go let your mind relax and just think about
Mhm.
the air going through the trees. It's restful. Don't think about your to-do list for 30 minutes. I'm not saying like check out of life and don't do anything, don't be responsible and don't work hard. I'm saying find something that you enjoy. Go for a walk,
Yeah.
kayak,
Oh, I love that. I
meet
love
up with a friend and like just like walk, I don't know,
Mhm.
crawl on the floor with their kids, like just mow a lawn.
Yeah, and
So
especially, well, I mean, for oh, you just raised a good point. Like people, parents, new parents or whatnot, they have kids, and just that's a whole, you're basically working 24/7 at that point, right? It's just like, how do you kind of
yeah,
traverse this environment? But I like what you said of just, so adjusting your mindset, right? So not thinking
yeah,
exercise in terms of I have to pump, I have to do different things. It's just, a walk
right,
outside,
yeah,
hearing the birds. Um,
hmm
walking. You said on a fall day. Here's the interesting part. You said earlier, you said something about the American lookout of exercise, right?
hmm
I come from a country where all you have to do to exercise is stand outside, and do nothing. Do absolutely nothing. You do the smallest nominal tasks without AC in the house, and you'll get your exercise in. Um,
yeah,
I think there's a lot to be said about sweat. It shocked me first time I heard about people using the sauna in America at
yeah.
gyms. You use the sauna before you work out. What? I thought you were supposed to use that after you work out. Um yeah, that's, I don't know why I thought about that, but
Thailand,
that's, yeah, Thailand. That's where I
yeah,
grew up, and we have four types. We have four weather slash climate zones there. It's like hot, hotter, and then the last two you put a swear word in front of hot. That's how crazy hot and crazy it gets.
yeah,
And it's just the fact that you know what the thing. I think the thing I'm trying to get at is there are a few things better than getting a full sweat on. Like an absolute full blast out sweat,
hmm
and then taking, just you feel like you can breathe. You know.
yeah, yeah.
Um.
It can be really good for you. No,
Yeah.
Thailand is definitely hot.
I miss it. To me, what's hard is to work out in the winter time. It's like the,
Yeah,
to me, as I believe I'm a Indiana veteran now, but oh man, like the cold, like you look
what do you
outside and
mean?
it's still like well, I've been here for 7 years. I came here for school. I went to
Okay,
Taylor in 2013, and I graduated recently. But like my first winter was so brutal. I looked outside and it was just snow for days and months on end, and to me that did something
yeah.
mentally and psychologically to me. To me, that's why I never complain about the hot anymore. But different people, different motivations. So if that's your look on exercise, what other hobbies do you personally make time for when you have the time?
I go on bike rides.
Mm-hmm.
I like to learn. I like to cook, just like something new.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I'll just think about something I want to make and I'll make it. Like today, I made a new recipe
Mm-hmm.
for the split pea soup. Um, Honestly, most of the margin in my life, I keep for like spontaneously going and seeing friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes I'll go over to a friend's house and be like, "Hey, are you home?
Yeah.
I'm here."
Mm-hmm.
And I just really enjoy having the margin to just hang out with people. And nurses' schedules, you work 3 days and you have 4 days off, and like I feel like 2 of those days I spend recovering from the 3 days, so it's 5 days. but
Yeah.
but then for the other days, I really like seeing people, and I think also with nurses, like not working the weekends and or working every third weekend and working a lot of evenings, you kind of miss feeling like a regular part of things. Like you can never have regular attendance at anything.
Yeah.
And so I always really crave human interaction pretty strongly.
I don't think. Yeah, that's. Well, one, I feel for you there, but I also feel like don't be too hard on the. Well, not. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the feeling out and like the fear of missing out, right? That's a real thing for you, for us.
Yeah.
And just like, I feel like any job, I feel is at our age, the people within our generation, I think it's a total shift from what has come before. Whereas like you had a regular kind of life, and depending on your occupation, right? But even if say someone like me or someone like a bartender or whatnot, you feel there's this constant fear of missing out because of your lack of a regular schedule. So not to compare being a nurse to a bartender, but there are some similarities there. The fact that you're constantly on call, your manager might call you, your executive, your boss might call you, say, hey, I need you to come in on this day or whatnot. I need you to work a double shift. So what are some mental things and games that you play to help you cope with that? Because I feel like a lot of people in society, that's like a thing they're not willing to admit. They crave human interaction, but a lot at the same time people are introverts. But at the same time, it's like this ever longing thing that people want to have. So when you're going through these ups and downs of your occupation as you do, what are things you're constantly thinking about to get yourself out of that box?
I feel like at this point in my career, it's kind of I kind of know what to expect, and I kind of know when I'll feel low and when it's predictable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I just regularly like reaching out to people and being like, hey, because I like doing things spontaneously so often.
Yeah.
But then it's something like on a day you're like, oh, I was going to go see this person and nobody's available. Then that can kind of blows.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just reaching out and planning things is helpful for other people to be available, who want to be available. And I don't know. I don't feel like I'm in a rut. I don't like feeling like I'm always. I don't like feeling unreliable. I think is what I don't mind that I miss church, every third Sunday, or I miss small group every now and then. But I don't like feeling like, I feel like, especially I'm definitely a millennial, and I feel like we get kind of a bad rap for like not being committed to things.
Yeah.
And so nursing definitely amplifies that. But I feel I don't feel like my not inability to commit to long-term things comes from like an internal thing. It's more external. It's both, I guess. But I don't beat myself up for not being a part of things regularly, but I do long to have that like faithful connection with people. I value that, and I don't know what it's fully like. I used to work outpatient in a cancer clinic, and I had more of that. But when I did that, and then I was like, man, I have all these nurse friends who have days off. So there's like there's good things to both schedules.
Sure. Yeah. And, I think it's the reoccurring battle of just dealing with the nature of the reality of our, of either your occupation or just life in general. The fact that things are not always going to go as you plan, like you like doing spontaneous things.
There's no dream job. Yeah.
Yeah. You like doing spontaneous things, but then again, at the same time, like you're doing what you want for a living. There's so many people currently that just they're you may it may be hard, but then you're also at the same time you like what you do, which is amazing. Which is incredible thing. And for me,
it's worth
I'm
it.
not in what I want to do at the moment, but at the same time I'm not miserable. There are people out there that are actually miserable whenever they go to work. It's like they get in and it's just like human. There's probably a chemical imbalance at a certain point, and also like there's a bodily. It's a bodily reaction when you go to work. You dread it, And
Yeah.
so for those people, you got to feel for them and just like just contend eh, getting yourself. So you said you can predict it, right? Like you said you can almost kind of see it coming when you know it's going to be like a tough grind.
If I have not been exercising regularly, and if I am not seeing people on my days off, not all day, but like on my day off, if I don't have anything to look forward to in the day, if it's like I got to do laundry, I got to cook, I got to do this, and I'm not going to see anyone at the end of the day, it makes me sad. And so just knowing that on my days off, usually I got to get this work done, but then like tonight after this, I'm going on a bike ride with a friend. So it's just something fun and interact. I need to interact with people. I need to have good conversation. Conversation really drives me, and conversation is like doing life with people. I don't know if you're into like Latin and Greek roots, but the word con in conversation means with, and then the verse or vert is the same Latin root as convert. Converse and convert have the same Latin roots, and then the vert means to turn over, so turn life over with. And it's kind of like didactic, or not just like dialectical dance. Just turning life over with another person is precious.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so with that in mind, do you think there's a difference between conversing with someone and interacting with someone? There definitely is, in my opinion, but in your opinion, online versus actually in person, because this whole year, and not just this year, obviously, but it's kind of been this thing where our generation in particular, we are now proficient with online interaction, online social interaction, social media or whatnot. What's your take on that and the fact that
well, you might be proficient, but I definitely clearly am not.
Oh, come on.
So as evidenced by this whole setup taking 30 minutes. So the question, can you ask the question again?
I guess the question is, what's your take on like social media and like how that has kind of, because that if you take a look at it from a generational perspective, that's almost in a way, and research has shown that it has contributed to a lot of our generation's dealings with depression.
Yeah.
And so even though we're reaching out together, even though we have more ways to contact with people than ever before, what's your take on that? As you maybe in your medical experience and knowledge, like do you avoid that as much as possible on your days off, or is it also a part of your life?
I don't avoid it, but it's no substitute for the real person right there. Or even when COVID happened, there were no visitors in the hospital, and we had people dying all the time, and so you're on a video chat with the family, and they're the ones making decisions. And for a lot of people, like not being there, if you were able there to see like your father or your mother or your grandfather or your grandmother suffering, and see that we are trying, like I think a hard thing for people was they would wonder, like, are you trying, or are you just letting my family member die? And I was like, no, we're trying. But when you're there in person, you can see, like, okay, they do this. Yeah, you can see it. And my dad's still declining despite X, Y, and Z. And all this treatment seems to be futile. So those are hard decisions, whether you're in person or not. But I do think social media has a good use, but it's not a replacement for in person. It can't. I mean, human beings are complex. Like, we're dynamic, and there's so much to us. And it just has its limitations. You feel there's a beginning and an end to this interaction. It's not fluid. It's got a start time and an end time, which doesn't feel natural.
And I like that you brought up what took place recently within your, I mean, especially this year. It's the same thing about seeing something happening in person as opposed to happening, on screen, which has been, to me, it's been my whole life with sports. This whole year has been a wildly confusing human kind of experiment, like a cruel human experiment almost, to see people kind of driven to the edge on what they can handle emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
It's been quite the hurdle, but I give you a lot of props for just those days. Especially you mentioned video calls with clients, right? With their
Patients' families,
patients' families, and you're in them. And what we don't, we the public miss out on. You guys are actually in those half the times because someone, either you're holding up the camera for them sometimes, or
right?
You're assisting them. Someone is always in the, especially for intensive care patients, right? I'd imagine that you do so much more for them on such a human, small, intangible levels that we just don't have any knowledge of at all. Like, what are some things that, for you, a lot, to kind of segue off of that, what are some of the tougher aspects of your job that we, the public, just don't know about, in your opinion? I know there's probably a lot, but.
So the tougher aspects are the long-term aspects of being in the midst of high stress emotions constantly. Mm-hmm. So, like as a nurse, you are coordinating care. So the doctor gives the orders, the nurse carries them out. Mm-hmm. But then, a patient will have a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a case manager, a social worker, all these people, and they all come through the nurse. And then the family members, there's a lot of legal aspects to medicine, and, often family members are not all on the same page, and there's ethical issues like does brain function as at this level? Are they alive, or is their life worthwhile? Or what makes a life? What makes somebody's life worthwhile? Like, or just the whole idea of being in a vegetable state. Is that, should we pull all life support off, or should we? And those are big value statements, and those are stressful things. And so I think the hardest part personally for me is to high stress emotions, being in the middle of them and being the coordinator. But since I have direct contact with the patient all throughout the day, most likely people's frustration, whether it's with me or with the doctor or with anyone else, it will come on me, and I will, I'll direct it and tell them where to solve it. But someone cursed out a doctor, I don't know. But last time someone cursed out a nurse was yesterday, or today. So I don't. When you're suffering and you're sick, you tend to be the worst version of yourself, and your family tends to be going through a lot too. So there's a lot of grace for people's behavior, but that's still the hardest part for me to constantly bear. People come to the hospital, have unhappy experiences, and how they react, you bear it.
Right, because from a patient standpoint, not only are you seeing yourself deteriorate, right, but then with nurses or doctors, I guess the also perception is you're in bed and they're just fine. In that moment, you're probably thinking to yourself, why am I in this situation to begin with? Look at these healthy people helping me out, and it's just like they have all this knowledge, and I'm just just kind of speaking aloud from if you were actually in a patient standpoint, it's just like you're seeing the kind of the mental thing that happens to you when you see other people that are perfectly fine helping you out and helping you with the smallest things, like getting up, or heck, maybe changing parts, changing the bedpan or whatnot. It's like that does so much kind of damage, or not damage, but it does something to you. The fact
psychologically, it's hard to feel helpless.
Yeah, like even
especially for
things.
Americans.
Yeah. So with that, so kind of taking that into mind, the difficulties of today, right? This may be a weird segment, but when did you first know that you wanted to become a nurse? Let's take a step back and revisit what made you the version of you today. When did you know, whether it was in your training or when you were a kid? Like when were moments and times that you knew you wanted to do this for a living?
I don't think I ever had
Oh, really?
that. I think after I became a nurse, I realized I wanted to be a nurse. Yeah, like
Okay.
probably 3 years into my career.
Mm-hmm.
I just picked something. I like science and I like people, and so I used to want to go into forestry or personal training.
Sure.
But then I decided no to both of those. In nursing, you get to learn science, and you get to be around people, and it seems like a good use of your time, of my time. So I thought I just kind of non-emotionally picked it. I didn't. Yeah, and even in school, people would say if you're not called to this profession, you're not going to make it. And I was always quietly being like, well, I guess I'm not going to make
good
it.
at it.
But I
you
made
guys-
it.
Yeah.
I did fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I graduated. I had great GPA. Like it wasn't an issue. Transitioning to the real job was a lot harder than school. But yeah, I realized that I wanted to be a nurse probably in 2018. And I had been a nurse for 3 years at that point. But I got to a point where I realized I wasn't a bad nurse anymore. Like I was a good nurse and I could take good care of people and I could help. Like I knew how to help them in deeper ways than just like physical, like I could impact people.
Yeah.
And that is cool. Or when you can see someone in the morning, on their face, they have no hope. But in the evening, they have hope and you can see it on their face. And then when I started to get to train other nurses, that's when I realized I really like being a nurse and I have something to offer. I think that's when I decided that I wanted to be a nurse.
Wow. So it was kind of, it by the sounds of it, it was something you were always like good at, but you didn't know you were good at it up until you had a body of work to then go off of. Right? Because,
I don't think I was a good nurse at the beginning. Like,
oh, really?
I think, yeah, it just took me. I mean, maybe other people would say differently. I'm a kind of a perfectionist. So maybe my harshest critic is me. But I lost my first job. My manager told me, hey, this is not for you. Like straight out of college, I worked in the multi-specialty critical care unit at Methodist, which is the most complex ICU there. It's the patients there are the most complex patients at Methodist. And I was not good at it. I wasn't progressing. So she asked me to resign. So I took a hit emotionally, like my career was shot. So it took me a few years to build that back up.
Yeah. So what? Okay, that's well, that is a hard moment in your life, right? That's one of the deeper, whenever someone asks you to resign or the fact that you meet failure. So how did you go about? Because and you're not alone in this. There's no way. There's so many people out there that go through this exact same thing. Me, for example, I failed college. The thing you were good at, I sucked at it. Like I couldn't. Oh, grades were terrible, but work, I found. Even if it was, customer service or stuff like that, I found enjoyment in actually working. So I found out very quickly I'm not really a student. And by the end of my educational career, I went from wanting to be a filmmaker to being an English teacher to just being an English major to then being a journalist. And that's where that's what I'm pursuing today, And whereas you've kind of found yourself a career. What were things, because I wager to believe that when you were first asked to resign, when you were taking that failure, when you were going through that stage, there was probably a lot of self-doubt that went into you, right? There's probably like just maybe I should try something else. Or I guess my question is, what were things that you did after that to kind of build yourself back up, to kind of build yourself a career that you have now, basically?
Yeah. I think one of the hardest things about losing my job was I thought my manager was right. I don't think she made a bad decision. I was not good at it and I could see it too. And I felt like I don't feel embittered towards her. She made the right decision. She's protecting her patients from a bad nurse. Not unethical, I just wasn't making progress.
Yeah.
So to kind of build myself back up, I just started in a lower stress area of nursing. I went and worked in a cancer clinic, which is outpatient. It's I wouldn't call it, I would never say this to like any other cancer nurse that it's easy, but it is simpler in that you have a schedule, you know what people are coming in for, you know what they're getting. And whereas in the hospital, you have no idea who you're taking care of every day. You don't know, it might be a new diagnosis that you've never, but there's more predictability in an outpatient setting. Outpatient meaning like an 8 to 5 clinic, not overnight. They're walking, they're talking. So I did that for a year and a half. And then once I was there, I wanted to go back inpatient. I wanted to go back in the hospital, just to kind of prove to myself that I could do it. And so I always knew when I was in the cancer clinic that I wasn't going to stay there for a long time, even though I liked it. I wanted to know what I can do. I even like that in, just regular life. I want to explore. I want to know what I can do. I want to see what I'm capable of. And so after that, I went and worked a year and a half in the neurotrauma PCU, progressive care unit at Methodist.
Okay.
And that's when I really realized that I like being a nurse. And you gain so much skills in patient. You gain so much critical skills. You learn how to make decisions under pressure. And that's invaluable to me.
Right. So maybe describe that, for example, the period that you learn, right? Because whenever we fail at something, there's that failure period, there's that feeling down, then there's the trying to build yourself back up. And then through that, you learn so much more about yourself than you could have maybe if you were successful at that first job to begin with. You are a better version of yourself now than when you failed initially. So what were some of the things that led you to learn these skills? What were aspects of this job, the second job that you had, or you said you were, this learning stage that you had? What were aspects of the job that made you, I guess, not only mentally tougher, but also like helped you build your confidence and the fact that you were trying hard every single time at it, every day at it?
I think the two things that I felt weighed me down, or the two things that I felt like I was really bad at was, one, critical thinking. Like I would take care of a patient, but then I would not be in my own mind. I would be like, okay, so what are the main things I'm trying to think about today? And I wouldn't know. I'd be like, well, I don't know. I need to do an assessment at this time and think about the tasks that I need to do, but not think about the bigger picture. So when I learned to see the bigger picture of like, okay, this person came in for a GI bleed, I am gonna make sure mentally they're not waxing and waning, because that's a symptom of them bleeding, or I'm gonna anticipate that I'm gonna check their blood later today, and if not, I'm gonna call the doctor and see what he wants to do. And so I just became better at predicting big picture things. And then the second thing that I felt like I was not good at is I just had no spine. Like if somebody was at me, it just crushed me. Because I'm a perfectionist. Like I want to be the best.
Yeah.
And people are unhappy a lot out in the hospital and in the real world. And people, when they're under stress, well, they can say just abusive, very critical things. And I learned to stand up for myself and take in, there's some criticism that I should take in. Like I don't do everything right. And so I should, I have examples of things that I learned that I heard and changed. But then there are some things that that's not true, and I'm not going to take that inside of me. Yeah. And I just kind of toughened up and learned to stand up for myself when you're kind of under some abuse from somebody else.
Yeah.
And that I really enjoyed my job because I knew how to set boundaries. And people do respond to boundaries. A lot of people do. There's like one or two that don't, and they're psycho, but the average person can be molded or can be
can be built to kind of take it, but not take it in terms of allowing yourself to be abused. But I think what happened and what has happened with a lot of people is that once at a certain point you learn to internalize and kind of contend with the reality of the situation. What's the reality of what I'm dealing with right out. You know, for me, I used to get much like you, but in opposite way. When people were rude at me, I'd get very angry. Like I'd go into the, I started off last year. I was a barista shift manager. I was a manager of a coffee shop, and whenever we got rude customers, like there was this one customer that would always like he would eye me. He was like bigger. He was trying to intimidate me. I was like, okay, cool. I go into the back room and I really punch the wall. I had a lot of anger issues like in the years past, you know. But I guess over time you kind of learn to wait, why? First of all, I have no idea the emotional baggage that anybody is bringing in the door. You know, that's you say you go to church, and that's one of the things church we pray about all the time is we have you as a nurse, you have this internally as well. You have no idea who's coming in the door. You have no idea really if they're the emotional / psychological wear that someone may have. So their outcry on you may not be a reflection on you. You know, you are your harshest critic. We are our harshest critics in reality. But in the reality of the moment, it's like, are they really angry at me, or are they or it's just like a reflection of where they are in life? And you know, and for me, dealing with customers or clients that have that same mentality, even if they're rude, you know, I'll try not. There's, you know, in all reality, who's gonna strike out at me with a violent tone? You know, just like, so I guess in different ways, I feel like you kind of found your backbone just by readjusting how you internalize criticism. You know, how you internalize the cursing and the kind of outpour. Because there are those days where your customers or your patients will just nail on you. You know, and you're just like, and now you're at a state, and sometimes it'll get to you, but now it's like you're at a point where you can see what's going on, and it's that part of the job you were talking about earlier where, you know, you're here to do a job, you're here to establish and do the objective right, you know, and just having that goal in mind kind of helps. You know, for me, it's getting the customers the right items, and you know, if you know, gluten-free or whatnot. You would not believe the amount of you would actually be pretty depressed by the amount of junk that people buy. Not to put my customers on blast, but just to say, like, Diet Coke or frozen foods, different kinds of frozen foods, to me, that to me is depressing. Whenever I, you know, do picking for customers, it's just like, really, you wanted the 12 ounce instead of, you know, or you know, Diet Cokes or
right.
For me, but a touchy thing is always like gluten-free. So like, if someone wants gluten-free, more than likely they're celiac or they have a certain kind of condition that you have to be aware of, you know. Yeah, I guess in a long-winded way, it's like, it's interesting to hear from your perspective, being a nurse, and just like the kind of abuse that you're made to deal with, and how you've kind of through the years, how you've kind of molded yourself to become tougher to deal with it, you know, because you see what's going on. Yeah.
And like I said earlier, there's a lot of room for grace. Like some people are out of their minds because they're sick. And some people are just terrible people, but there's also I'm going to be here for 12 hours. I'm still going to make this work, and I can't make it work if I don't have any respect for this person. There's a lot of room for grace, and there's a lot of room for telling people, hey, this is how you can speak to me. If you are not going to speak to me, I'm not obligated to stand here and listen to it. I'm going to walk out. And a lot of times, if you do stand up, people, like, the rest of the day, you'll have a great relationship with them. They start to respect you more. And I feel like most of the people that, like, if the night shift nurse is giving me a patient and she says, like, well, this is going to be a really challenging patient, a lot of times, if you just show some like a little respect to that person, lasting a night shift nurse, that's who I get report from in the morning, because I'm a day shift nurse. But a lot of times, if you show respect to that person, they will respond to feeling respected, and sometimes that's the whole issue. And again, I'm not blasting on night nurse. I'm just, those are the people I get report from, so that's kind of what I'm saying there.
No, they're the people that give you your mission objectives. You get there in the morning, like, they're
passing on their patients to me, so I totally respect night shift. I just phrased it poorly.
No, that's fine. You know, the whole this question of when did you first you wanted to become a nurse. Like a lot of people, you kind of stumbled upon it, right? This was something that you thrust yourself into, and it seems like you found a way to go about finding and applying your interests, right? Because your initial interests,
Yeah.
like a lot of people that go to college, or like a lot of people that go off, on their educational paths, dude, half the time you're gonna switch, you're gonna pivot, you're gonna adjust, you're gonna, go maybe where God leads you in a different path,
Right.
So what
Yeah.
advice would you say you have for people that are just, because there are a lot of people going to college right now during coronavirus, it's like that maybe want to become a nurse, it's always, or maybe want to become a nurse. Do you have any advice for people that are entering this field, that are maybe about to
Oh.
start their grad school, or also just like, because that's another hurdle that people have to cross, either undergrad or grad, or just maybe someone just doesn't know what they want to do right now. You having been through the stuff that you've been through, what would you say to people?
I have no regrets about becoming a nurse, that's for sure. It is a great degree. I have a bachelor's, and that is that's really a lot. You can do a lot with that degree. You can do a lot with an associate's degree too in nursing. If my audience is people who are thinking about nursing, I think 100% it's a good idea, because even if you don't want to work inpatient, you can work outpatient, you can work in administration, you can do home health. Nursing is like the ultimate millennial job. Like, you have a very flexible schedule. If you want to switch jobs anytime, there's always jobs open. There's always a demand for nurses. You have great job security, except for, I guess, during COVID, some nurses did lose their job. But since when people talk about getting intimidated for interviews, I'm like, why are you intimidated? They just want to see that you have a degree and that your heart's beating, and like they'll hire you. Like it's very flexible. And unless you try to screw it up, you probably will be fine. If thinking about a master's degree, I mean, that's great. That's cool. I mean, you're very employable. But no, nursing's a great degree. It's diverse. And nursing skills are life skills, like how to talk to people, how to set boundaries with people, how to take care of people who don't want to be taken care of, how to persuade people to do what they should do, and how to also how to let go when somebody doesn't want to get better and that's their choice, and you let go. You don't let go in an ethical sense, but I respect your decision. Yep, I will let go. So you learn a lot of skills, a lot of like even business skills. Like there's a cost to everything. There's efficient ways to do things, and leadership skills. Like for my patients, I'm the leader of their care. Like the doctor calls the shots in the sense, but I can tell him pertinent things. I am coordinating the entire day for my patient, and that gives you confidence and clinical judgment. Stuff that's not like not objective. There's subjective things, and you say, "Well, I've seen this before, and I think this is our best course of action." And I have, you have good judgment, and that's really valuable.
Yeah,
you have good assessment skills. Nursing is a great field. It's so employable and it's so valuable, and it can transfer to so many job types.
Would you say right now kind of transitioning into the current state of things, would you say there is even more of a need now for good nurses to come out, or
there's always a need for good nurses? As far as more or less, I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. I don't really keep tabs on society in general, so I don't know.
Okay, so all that we've gone through this year, and your experiences as a nurse so far, what is as a weird kind of segue, what is your current take on the general public's stance of the virus? Because I feel like, because to kind of maybe preface the question further, we've gone through the ebbs and flows of what happens when a pandemic occurs, right? So when it first occurs, major panic, grocery stores depleted, people panic buying or whatnot, so major fear. But now it seems like the fear has gone away, but the virus is still very real. in many respects. So what's your take? Are you more frustrated, or are you just kind of again contending with the reality of the situation? Like what do you have for the current status of the virus versus the public's like attitude towards it, in your opinion?
Sure. I think thoughts on that subject. So I'll try to be brief because everyone but I think, it's a real virus. It really is a disease. We don't have a cure for it. So you should be careful. I do think if you're social distancing, wearing a mask, I don't think going out in public is a bad thing. I don't think staying in your house. I think staying in your house and not exercising and not seeing people can create 100 different problems just by mitigating one. As far as society, I do think we accomplished as a society like mass population health education. We educated people, like people understand, hand washing and covering your mouth. Like that's huge. We accomplished like population-wide health education. So we did that. I think at this point, people should have the freedom to say, I don't feel comfortable with this. I feel comfortable with this, and kind of make their own choices. There's always going to be people who things back or not, they're going to cause trouble. So that's whether we open up or not doesn't mitigate, in my opinion, does not change the troublemakers.
Yeah.
So that's I do think opening up is a good plan, and it can be done well, and it can be done right. And there are other needs. There are other needs that are getting forgotten.
Yeah, it's because it's interesting to me to see that kind of human kind of not experiment, you know what I mean? But it's like what has happened to the human psyche as we've gone through this. Because when the virus first started, when it first broke out on a massive scale in America, we've never seen anything like this. At least in our life, if you've been around since 1918 with the Spanish flu, that's the last time.
Right.
I think America had my university had a paper from 100 years ago reporting about it. But what happened was people were very fearful, right? And then masks were scarce. You couldn't get a mask. People were exhausting Amazon or whatnot, and so then Amazon and these other shipping corporations had to prioritize medical facilities, whatnot, and then. For whatever reason, 4 months later, the perplexing thing for me to see was people rebelling against masks. A small vocal minority, like you said, the troublemakers, right? This small vocal minority kind of blasting out, and that has an effect on people. Just seeing kind of, does anything I do really matter? We're gonna get this virus anyway. We're gonna have to develop immune bodies to this anyway, which I think is a very kind of selfish kind of way to think about it, but.
Right.
What you're saying about things opening up, I think it's important as well, because you have a people that have been shut. You have a virus that shut down the global economy. For me, I was watching an NBA game. It was a basketball game. Then I saw a staff member run out of the locker room and said, "No, Nicole, we can't play this game." And then 5 minutes later, I get a call from my dad saying he can't go to work. He lives in Thailand. That's never happened to me before. Seeing it on screen and then it appearing on my phone in less than 10 to 5 minutes, stuff going on like that. So just the change that people. So you said you hit on something interesting, where you said the health education of the country and the world has improved because of this virus. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, people are understanding hand washing and covering your cough. I mean, those sound basic to us, but they're not to every person. I think of the Ebola crisis in 2014, 2015 in Liberia. The biggest Samaritan's Purse was the primary. Samaritan's Purse and Doctors Without Borders were the main organizations managing that crisis, and their biggest barrier was educating the people not to kiss the dead body, because culturally they kiss the body,
right?
And there's body fluid in your sweat. There's it's it's transferable, and they were pleading with people and try to educate people. Viruses and spreadable diseases, if you figure out how they are spread, you can figure out how to stop it. You stop the spread, you don't get the disease if you stop the spread.
Right.
If you know how to not get it. And so viruses are scarier, I think, than something like Ebola, because breathing is, you can't stop breathing. You're always going to breathe. But you, like, if you're symptomatic, that's when you're most likely to be contagious. So if you're coughing, if you're not coughing, you're not producing enough force to expel the virus from your respiratory system. So your risk up. When COVID started, the chief intensivist at the hospital addressed all the nurses, and he basically said, you're all going to be exposed to COVID, and we're not going to quarantine you. And the reason why is because unless you're symptomatic, you have to come to work. Because if you're symptomatic, what we know as medical professionals is you're contagious if you're symptomatic. If you're not symptomatic, you're not contagious. And that's what we're going to run on, because we need you to work. And that, I believe, other respiratory issues are like that too. The flu is like that too. You can be a carrier and not spread it if you're not having symptoms. So yeah, education is a big deal, and we did it. And so I think the biggest hurdle has been crossed, and I think there's a lot of room for grace in this too, like being patient with one another, not judging someone because they're tighter than you. And I mean, I have watched lots of people die. I know it's real. I'm not saying it's not real, and they died awful deaths. But I also think you educate people, and you trust what you know, because you can't just live in fear. You trust what you know, and you try.
So in I guess, for going further with the public's knowledge of health education, what are areas you say that we could improve in, as far as knowing, and not just pertaining to this virus, because we've always kind of struggled to maintain like health standards, right? Even across the board before this virus even started, but maybe accentuated by the virus. So now you're saying stuff like covering your mouth when you cough, or surfaces or whatnot.
Yeah, or even like washing your hands after you go to the bathroom.
For 20 seconds, the whole fingers thing, the fact that it should take about 20 seconds to wash your hands, or, about that. Like,
yeah, the research shows 20 seconds. That's the recommended time. But even just like people rinsing their hands with water, like bacteria and things on your hands, water does not pull it off your hand. You need something that's lipid based, like soap. Soap has lipids, and that pulls. You're not actually killing bacteria with soap. You are loosening it from your skin, and then the water rinses it off. That's the basic concept of washing your hands.
Right.
I mean, there's antibacterial soap, but I think that's ridiculous. You don't need it. You just need soap. Regular soap is fine. But I think just go ahead.
No, so you said something about antibacterial soap. That's funny, because that's still scarce at the moment in grocery stores. Like if you go, there's a certain aisle, at least for the chain that I work at, right, or the one that I help facilitate and manage. There's like antibacterial, like the either the hand sanitizer or whatnot. It's always out. But then again, there's plenty of soap, and not oxymoron, but the kind of funny thing about doing this kind of work is you'll see some people are so adamant about getting this one particular product, right? They'll say no to substitutes, and I'm sitting there thinking, it's still soap. It's exactly the same thing. This one may stink a little bit, so that may be the reason you don't want it. But like, I
also think it's funny that people are all up in arms about antibacterial soap. I need antibacterial. I was like, don't you know this is a virus? It's not even bacteria. I was like, but either way, you just need soap. Soap pulls it off. So.
It was just funny. It was kind of funny / sad to see the public targeting certain products. Like the whole toilet paper instance was bizarre. Was so bizarre to me. And obviously, Lysol cleaning products were gone, because people had in your opinion, you probably think this too, but in my opinion, I think there was this mass overreaction to how to go about personally taking care of yourself, because you saw the shelves, right? You saw these places
Yeah,
just
I did.
depleted of everything, whereas it should have. I don't know, if people weren't as picky, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't have been that way. Was there any way that we could have avoided that particular scares, or is that just like within our nature to do so?
Yeah. I think, it reminded me of Y2K when, the turn of the century and
Oh
everybody thought
yeah,
society was going to shut down and
yeah.
computers and all that. I think what we can do better is like trust that if you trust that God's sovereign, fear can control a person. Like we are not invincible. We can be controlled by things outside of ourselves. Fear is crippling. And like even from my point of view, I am not invincible. I can get sick and die just like anyone else. I try to be healthy, but I am just as fragile and limited as anyone else. So I think honestly, just having trust in Jesus, trust in God's sovereignty, and trusting that I do the best I can to take care of myself, but I'm still in life because God has put me on this earth to live. I think that's a game changer for me as far as not having compulsive behavior. And like I said, everything I say, there's grace. Like I don't have any chronic diseases. I don't have any autoimmune diseases. I'm not the most vulnerable person. So I have a different perspective than maybe somebody with MS or somebody with COPD. So, and I respect that.
Yeah.
But I do think no matter where you fall on the vulnerability line, I think you not have to be controlled by fear.
Right.
We have power through Jesus to have peace. We can have peace. It's there for us, and we take it.
Yeah.
So
I like. So you see, because you have that background where you were able to, you have Jesus to internalize everything that's going on, and it's tough from kind of, I guess, what we say a world perspective to just go about it. So a little to kind of wrap up the virus. I have one last thing for you after this. Is do you have any realistic predictions on when? Because you have insider knowledge on how this field works, right? And so a fast timeline for like a vaccine or whatnot, in my estimation, is about what, 3 years, 3 to 5 years.
a fast timeline.
Yeah. Would you say that's accurate, or for you? Like my math is obviously completely off. So maybe
I think it would be faster than that.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's probably so much funding right now. But that area, that's way out of my area of expertise. Sure. So I don't feel like my opinion is any better than yours, to be honest. But sooner than 3 years. I mean, there's a people. It's hard to say because it's October in an election year.
Right. But, yeah. Oh man, that's a can of worms.
Oof. And I don't think that. I don't think I'm going to go get it right away. I mean, right. I'm a vaccine believer. Like I am all about vaccines, but even so, new drugs, I want to wait. I want to wait a few years and see how they do, and that's what I'm going to do. Well, flu shot's different. I get the flu shot every year because it's been around for a long time. But
right. Well, certain people feel people feel differently about flu shots, but why? So your word matters to me in that regard. I think it truly, your words carry weight in that regard because this is your profession, right? But it maybe not to put too much emphasis on it. Why would you recommend waiting a little bit before going? If a cure were to come out, say mid next year or at the end of next year, why would you say wait in your opinion?
Well, a vaccine is not a cure. A vaccine, it helps your body develop antibodies. So
antibodies, yep.
It helps you fight it if you do get it faster. You fight it faster. wait is because there's so much political pressure on the development of it.
Yeah.
And I've never seen this in my life before. So I I'm not afraid. I'm not going to live in fear without it. And so
Hmm.
I don't feel it'd be different if I was dying of cancer and there was a new cancer drug that just came out. I would probably take it if I
Mm.
knew I was going to, but if I'm doing okay without it, I know how to protect myself.
Hmm.
I'm going to wait a little longer um, to see because every drug has side effects. And I mean, America is a great country. We test things well and our drug companies do a good job for the most part. There's always horror stories, but they do a good job for the most part compared to, other places in the world. There are high standards here. So I don't think whatever comes out is going to is going to be like, oh, this is actually lethal and we just weren't paying attention. I think it will probably be a pretty good product,
Hmm.
but there will be side effects. There will be things from it. And I don't know how big or small they're going to be. And I'm not in a point of crisis, so I'm going to wait.
Sure. All right. Well, that kind of wraps up the virus and just your outlook as a nurse. I guess one final thing I have for you is what taking all that we've talked about so far, taking all that we've talked about, all the your experiences into a whole, what is the most important value that you hold, either in your job or your life? Values that you like absolutely establish for yourself going into your
Mm-hmm.
workday, going in, coming out, of your daily life. What are values that you hold dear and that you hold yourself
Sure.
by, like your standards of it?
I think I have a deep
Mm-hmm.
confidence in what I believe. Um, I'm not a perfect person, and even when it comes to Jesus, like I don't perfectly live out my faith, but I know what I believe. It gives me comfort to do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
It it gives me peace. I'm not afraid of disease. I'm not stupid and like trying to be reckless,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not afraid. And knowing Jesus also gives me the comfort that not only am I not afraid of death, but I'm not afraid to risk um, my comfort or my um, I'm not afraid to try and to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid to engage hard situations, which can backfire and can, like
Mm-hmm.
people might reject you. I'm not afraid to get rejected because I have been accepted by God despite the fact that I don't deserve it and I reject God like on a regular basis, but he's
Yeah. No, those are those are great values to have, just because, and I love the fact that you've got like faith as a tangible, like your faith has a tangible slash realistic purpose in your life. You're relying on it
it
constantly.
comes to life. It's
Yeah.
not just something I believe in on
Mm-hmm.
Sundays. It impacts my daily life.
Mm-hmm.
And when stuff happens, I struggle. I struggle.
Yeah.
But I'm not without hope. And
Mm-hmm.
that is different. There are people I watch and I die and they don't have hope.
Yeah.
Like they don't have hope.
Yeah, and I guess to kind of compare like to other professions as well, it's like almost whenever we deal in a business where we deal with people, so it's like you are constantly trying to mediate or whatnot, and just I feel now more than ever like you gotta. I like what you say about it having faith as being a realistic, um having purpose in your
Yeah.
life, having Jesus to like not only fall back on, to have him truly lead you throughout life.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
like that's the whole thing about taking up your cross. That I feel like that's a as the more I grow, obviously, because as a teenager or when your needs are being met by other people, you don't really, it's not really tangible. But I guess when you're out
Yeah.
on your own and you're trying to make your own way in life, you kind of see it come to fruition.
Yeah.
So, well, Laura, we've done an hour and 14 minutes. Can you believe it?
All
You're
right.
such a
I mean, I can
natural.
keep going.
You're such a
No
natural at
water.
this, man. I guess maybe to close, do you have any kind of in closing, do you have any funny stories of stuff that's happened to you that kind of, but at the same time reinforces the fact that you want to do this? Like any cool kind of
Any
maybe
stories?
maybe stuff that should stay off the record or whatnot. Just like cool, fun experiences that you've had, maybe to encourage those who actually want to become nurses as well, or those of people that are trying to look for their career. Like what are some fun kind of tidbits you've had along the way, basically?
I mean, anytime you get to take care of like a 90-year-old woman who's just like a happy person, she will like. I mean, I had like a 90-year-old lady a couple of weeks ago. She gave me her number. She said, I'd like to keep you as a friend. And just like, will you call me and come visit me? And I called her. And like I liked her too. Took care of a 100-year-old lady who just she was the sharpest minded person I know, and she was 100 years old. Wow. Once I took care of this woman who had some serious brain damage. And when you assess mental status, you tend to ask people, what's your name? What's your birthday? What's the date today? Who's the president? Where are you right now? Stuff like that. She could not answer any of those questions. She just grunted. But then every now and then she'd have moments of coherence, and all she would say was, Kevin Costner is so sexy. She couldn't even say her name. So like, there's some pretty great moments.
Why Kevin Costner? How old was this lady? How old?
In her like 59, I think.
Oh, okay, that explains. That explains. If you were saying 100 years old and Kevin Costner, I'm like, oh, interesting.
That's different generation.
The Bodyguard, that's a bad movie. Okay, just to and maybe further, do you have any like movies that you like to watch? Or like any other thing? I know we touched on the hobby stuff already, but you said cooking, or are there any shows you're currently watching, or not really?
Big into watching TV. I really like to read a story. I like to read a story. So right now I'm reading through the Chronicles of Narnia. They're just like
they're
great
fun
stories.
They're fun.
I read Little Women. I read.
Oh, did you watch the movie on that? The movie that recently came out last year with Emma Watson.
What
did you think of it? Because I wanted to see it, but I never made time for it. But okay. So what you?
It was fine. The book is really good, and the movie. Well, I just like I don't know. I like books.
Yeah, same. Well, for me, I'm currently rereading Harry Potter. Like just rereading all of them. I read all of them in high school 3 times through, and now I'm reading like an analysis book. Typical English major stuff right here. Do you have any books that you recommend to people? Maybe.
One of my favorite books in the whole wide world is called Evidence Not Seen. It's by Darlene Deidler Rose.
Sure.
It's a great book for when you don't feel in your relationship with God, but like learning to trust when you don't feel anything. You're not basing. And it's a beautiful story. It's a story that, like, why is she not as famous as Elizabeth Elliot? I don't know. She's a boss. She was the first woman missionary to Papua New Guinea, like in the jungle. So there's that. There's so many good books out there. Yeah. I don't even know where to begin, but that's probably one of my most favorite books.
All right, Evidence Not Seen. I'm starting to read this book. It's called On the Madness of Crowds by Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, it's not the original Frederick. Let's see. Okay. The Madness of Crowds. But this was a guy that was recently on the Joe Rogan podcast. I know it's a very typical guy thing to want to watch Joe Rogan. He's like the Whitney Oprah Winfrey. I'm sorry, of guys. But honestly, this is a guy that speaks. This is kind of the guy that inspired a lot of us to start our own podcasts. Douglas Murray. I'm sorry, Frederick Douglass. That's a typical English major kind of.
I didn't even know he wrote a book with that name. No.
He's read it. Frederick Douglass. He is. But yeah, The Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray. This is a guy that recently appeared on the Joe Rogan show, and with all the protests going on right now, and all the kind of this year being way more politically charged than even 2016 was. If you remember what that year was like, just like a whole bunch of kind, and just to kind of see through what's actually happening in a crowd, just the real reality of violence and the reality of what happens when you put a bunch of angry people in one space, to me is important. It's like I feel I internally need to know more about, because I know a little bit about the reality of violence, having studied some martial arts, but like this right here is groupthink is a completely different thing, carries different weight in society today, and it carries over into all occupations, not just my field but your field as well. What people collectively think versus what is actually going on, kind of learning to differentiate between perception and reality. It's like a thing that constantly
Yeah.
thinking about. Yeah. So okay, you're a book person. Laura, it's been great having you on this podcast. In closing, do you have any?
For inviting me.
Yeah, no, obviously. Honestly, we might need to do a 2.0 in the near future just to see how, after things have changed, if things have changed in your industry at all, if, you have any more stories to dig at. But all right, do you have anything more to say? Do you have any more
I'm just really grateful for you being interested in my life, so thank you.
All right. Well, guys, that's been Crunchy Take episode number 22. This is Laura Mumme. She's a nurse at Communities, and a darn good one. So if you ever come into contact with her, say hi. And this has been the podcast. Thanks for listening, Laura. Thank you. And
thank you.
We'll catch you later.